Okay, so we're going to do gradient mesh now. Go ahead and create a new artboard of, the same size. Grab the artboard tool, and you can just click new and stick this artboard. Please don't overlap your artboards, that gets kind of confusing. And just stick that artboard right there. From here, we need to import a file. So, as we have done many times, oh, there are a bunch of layers in here. So what we need to do is go to File, Place. I think it will create a layer for us, so we don't need to worry about that. File, Place. And right quick, on your lab project twos, very important, guys, very important that you guys do this. So when you create your tracing elements, I would like you to keep them within the document itself. What you need to do is, oh, I've got way too many files here. When importing any image, go ahead and, where is it? I have to select an image first, hang on. So if I select grapes.jpg, do you see this link checkbox? Make sure it is unchecked. If you check it, then you need to give me the JPEG along with the file because it links it. It doesn't embed it. If you uncheck it, it will embed that. Now, we definitely, if you want a tracing layer by default, you can check this template option. And if you want more options, you can go through the whole options, but honestly, template's more than enough.
In what cases do you want to link as opposed to embed?
If the file is too big. Usually you link because you want the file size to stay small. And sometimes it's easier to manage if that JPEG was actually part of the artwork. You could manipulate just that JPEG without having to open the whole file. So if you were like constructing a large file and it had lots of components, you could like create a bunch of little files and work from those. A guy named Bert Monroy, I think I've talked about him before, he creates things with like thousands of layers, right, inside of both Photoshop and Illustrator. But one computer cannot hold that. So he creates little elements. He creates little parts of his image, and then he like uses a supercomputer or something. I don't know what he uses to compile it, but he kind of compiles it all together. One of the things you can do is link things together. But for these purposes, I don't want you to link because it just creates more problems. I'll go ahead and select grapes.jpg and select place. It will give me an image that is gigantic, so I'm going to hit Command- a few times. Of course, we did check template, so it is going to lock that layer. Let's go ahead and unlock that layer inside of your layers palette. And remember, we don't squish kittens here, so what do we do when we shrink our raster images? What do we hold down the shift key. That is correct. Constrain those proportions. All right. I'll go ahead and once I get that position somewhere, wherever you guys feel like it, somewhere in the middle of your document, I will go ahead and, let's see, do I want to lock it? I'll go ahead and lock it. And then I want to double click, I need to get to the layers options. So I want to double click anywhere where the name isn't. Does that make sense? So anywhere in this gray area, I can double click. If I double click the name, it will let me rename this layer. Maybe I don't know, while I'm here, grapes, why not? But if I double click here, I can get to the panel options. And I want to select dim images too. Actually, I want to unselect that entirely. Because we're going to be sampling colors from the grapes with the eyedropper tool. And if it's dimmed, it will sample, I think it will sample the dimmed color. I actually need to double check that. I think it still samples the dimmed color. And it just looks bad too. All right, I'm holding down the spacebar tool, and that lets me drag around. If you hit Command spacebar, you can actually temporarily bring up the. Double click anywhere in the layer. So you want to kind of double click. See there's kind of a giant gray area. Mine's much larger because I changed my panel options. Remember how I always kind of go in here and change my panel options and adjust it to make it larger, just so you guys can see a lot better. But actually, honestly, selecting large here is not a terrible idea, as long as you don't have, when your files get really complex, sometimes that can be bad. But So double click in the layer here, and that brings up the layer options. You can change the color and all kinds of things. We already set it as a template, and then we want to uncheck dim images. All right, the first thing that we're going to need is a path around this grape. We're going to trace this grape and recreate the gradients inside of it in a way that you cannot do with the regular gradients tool or gradient options inside a thing. You can only kind of do this effect with the gradient mesh tool. I'm going to go ahead and grab the pen tool and trace on it. Of course, it's not going to let me. What is going on? I am on a layer that is locked. I don't really want to work on the same layer as my tracing layer, so I'll create a new layer by clicking the Create a New Layer icon at the bottom of the Layers palette here. It's that icon right there. Layer 7, I'll go ahead and call this tracing just for my sake. And of course now I can trace. So for any reason Illustrator doesn't let you work on that layer, double check and make sure that what you're working on isn't locked. And then just like the ellipse that we created, oh, you know what? My layer is showing green and I'm working on a green object. That might not be the best. Let me undo that a few times. I'm going to go back into the layer options. That was on the video, by the way. I don't know if the mic picked that up or not. I'm going to go back into the layer options and I can change it. Oh, it was on cyan. That's weird. And let's pick a color that's not green. Burgundy. Ron Burgundy. Let's try that one. I'll click OK. And just like the ellipse that we did, I'm going to create an ellipse out of 4 points using the pen tool. Of course, for some reason, I have created a fill of black, which will annoy me, so I'm going to hit Command Y to bring in that outline mode and trace a rough shape. Doesn't have to be perfect. Remember your 1/3 rule. I'll grab my white arrow tool to make some quick adjustments here. And that looks pretty good. Okay, this is when creating too many points can become an issue later. So try to do it in 4 points if you can. And they should all be smooth points. If you create it without smooth points, if you hold down, so don't punch that Alt key. If you punch that Alt key, you've done something wrong. If you created cuss points, we could mess with our mesh. It could screw with our mesh. So there's a couple of different ways of creating a mesh. We can do so by going to Object. Where is it? Object Mesh. Where is it? Where's that stupid mesh option? Path. I have forgotten where it is. Where's the mesh option? My paint, path, shape. Slice, trim marks, create. Oh, create gradient mesh. Of course, there it is. Object create gradient mesh. I usually use the tool. And this gives us an option. And as always, for some reason, Illustrator likes to have this preview checkbox unchecked. Please check it. It is what you want. And we can see it creates a grid out of that object, almost as though that grid is shaping over the three-dimensional object. It's kind of trying to figure that out. But it's not perfect. I mean, we can notice that it sort of has created a little squiggle here, which might be nice later on. However, you're probably going to want more gradient meshes, just kind of based on how things get lit. You're probably going to want more gradient meshes here on the end, but even if I increase my rows and columns, I can't really, they're always going to be evenly spaced from one another. Right? I don't have a lot of control over that. I'll go ahead and click cancel because what I'm going to do instead, I'm going to show you the other way of doing it. Let's grab the mesh tool, which it looks like this sort of warped painting kind of thing underneath your perspective tool, the mesh tool. And from here, what we're going to do is, let me zoom in a little bit. Holding down the space bar to bring up that hand tool. And what we can do is we can create our own columns and rows by clicking on the line. See how the icon sort of becomes a little plus? Oh, it's really tiny. Sometimes the mouse, it zooms in the actual cursor. Sometimes it doesn't. That's so weird. I wish I knew why. But anyway, it becomes a little plus icon and it creates a mesh. Wait, oops, it kind of, okay, so what it has done here is it tried to create a row when it thought I was trying to make a column. Does that make sense? So I've created a row. I'm going to press Command Z to undo that. So I'm going to click, let's try clicking up here towards the top. Aha, now it has created a row. That's much better. And then maybe I'll click over, excuse me, it created a column, not a row. And then I'll keep clicking down here until I start getting rows, because I don't really want rows. Well, maybe one row up here might be okay. I really would like a row kind of across the middle there. And this kind of thing is sort of up to taste and sort of, it just takes practice to get Illustrator to do what you want. Like, I really like a row down here in a similar fashion to the one up there. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get it to do it just that way, because it's going to, let's see, is it going to, see, it's going to start creating columns at some point instead of rows. So maybe a few down there. You don't have to manipulate these, create exactly what I'm showing you. I probably need another column just somewhere in here. Don't create like gobs and gobs and gobs of these things, by the way. Don't create like 50 million of these things. You will drive yourself nuts. Because what's going to happen is you need to assign a color to each and every single one of these points. Now, here come the really weird things about this tool. Okay, so let's say I have a point here. I can click and drag it around. Be careful about creating meshes that are like all construed like this. It can be tempting to sort of force it, but usually the option, what you want to do is you'll want to delete this row and recreate it. Here's why. Because what you want to do is if I hold down the Shift key, it will actually constrain that to the kind of row line, or excuse me, column line, keeping those confused, the column line that it's attached to. But it won't let me select multiple points at the same time unless I grab the white arrow tool. If I grab the white arrow tool and I shift click, then it will let me click and select multiple points along here. Very important. You cannot select more than one point with the mesh tool. I wish you could, but you can't. But when you do that, I cannot hold shift and constrain my lines, right? There is not a good way to manipulate entire rows and columns. You have to grab the mesh tool and delete it. And the way that you delete it is you mouse over it and let's see, you hold down the Alt key. Remember, Adobe loves its modifier keys. The Alt key has a tendency to delete or remove. Incidentally, when you guys were using the sprayer tool, if you hold down the Alt key with the sprayer tool, you'll subtract from the sprayer tool much in the same fashion that you would have added. So it's almost like an eraser as opposed to, that's what the Alt key tends to do. You can even notice that the cursor changed to a little minus sign. Now, if I minus over just this point, it will delete the row and the column. If I minus sign over the line itself, it will minus over just that column. And then I can recreate that row. Oops. Let me recreate it. There we go. I can recreate that row. If you want to manipulate how the line is working, I'll press the A key to bring up my white arrow tool. Notice that much like the pen tool, there are 4 handles associated with these, and these handles are always attached. They cannot be detached. You cannot create a cusp point inside of the mesh thing. It would really mess with things. I don't know that you would really want to. I'm kind of glad that it doesn't let you. However, you'll notice that it's like it's double smooth points If you want to manipulate all the points at the same time, I think you have to hold down the shift key. Let me see. Or wait, is it the command key or the shift key? I forgot. Is it the alt key? Darn it. I don't remember how to do this. I thought it was the shift key. Click and shift. It's not letting me do it. Is it letting anybody else do this one? If you hold down the shift key with the white arrow tool and you click, no, it will constrain that. Maybe it was with the mesh tool. Ah, that's it. So using the mesh tool and going between the white arrow tool and the mesh tool is kind of how you get these points to finagle the way that you want. Now, here's what we're going to do. There are a couple of different ways. And incidentally, I am working inside of, you guys remember going to outline mode by going to view? I'm going to switch in between those a lot. So please remember, I'm going to use the command key of Command Y. I use that a lot. It's good to kind of get under your fingers, that one. So I am in outline mode. That is why that is removed. Incidentally, if for some reason, one thing I did forget to mention, that when you create a mesh, it will do two things. It will delete the fill and it will delete the stroke. You can reapply the stroke inside of the appearance panel. Actually, it did delete the fill. That's weird. It didn't delete the stroke. Maybe that changed. In 2014 it did, and maybe it changed in 2015. Huh. Maybe it doesn't delete the fill, because it still has a fill. All right, maybe I'm wrong about that. Well, we'll see. Command Y. Command Y will kind of outline mode. Makes things easier to see. You're not actually changing how things look, you're just sort of viewing it differently. And here is the meat of the mesh tool, and that is each of these points needs to have a color associated with it, or else it won't really do anything. Right now, I think every color has just pretty much become black. Oh, that's weird. I'm in like the mesh points of the... Huh. That's weird. Sometimes the appearance panel will show you like one level down, like you're inside of the parent object. I'm confused a little bit with them. Anyway, let's get to that later. So there's a couple of different ways of working inside of here. I'm going to go ahead and let's grab my color palettes. Where is the color palette? So I'll just go to window color because I can't seem to find it. And if you ever see this, remember you can double click the name color. Just double click. Oh, come on, back. Come do me color panel. You can always... Oh, no, I'm going to click and drag you out here. Being bad. All right. It also helps to anthropomorphize your panels. Talk to them. Make sure that they know that they're being used well. I find that... I'm going crazy. I find that... CMYK, no, don't work in this mode. HSB is actually going to be a good color mode. Remember, every panel has a couple of different options. Usually these options up here at the top right, it's a little teeny tiny icon. They love these little teeny tiny icons inside of here. Select HSB, hue, saturation, brightness. Pretty good for working with inside of the mesh tool because you usually don't want to change your hue. You're going to want it to stay sort of a green color, but adjusting the saturation and brightness are going to help you create... What are you guys laughing at? Are going to help create that illusion that this is a three-dimensional object, because we need light and shadow in order to see those, but we don't want to change the color.
And if you're getting ready to print it, would you just convert to CMY, or does that really mess with it?
Illustrator is one of the best programs to print out of I've ever worked with, even better than InDesign. And that question I might leave for next week. I think I'm going to talk about printing in Illustrator next week.
I'll write it down.
Yeah. Printing and exporting in Illustrator next week. Maybe. Each of these points needs to have, and whether or not you're working, now remember the mesh tool cannot select multiple points, but you can select one point at a time. And if you grab your eyedropper tool, once you have to select a point, so click any of these points, grab your eyedropper tool, and we're going to sample the color. We're actually going to click the point itself, but it's going to sample the color beneath it. And at first it looks like I did nothing. Of course, it did do something. I'm just in outline mode. And we can see that that point has become that color. And then remember, what have all the other points been set to by, I guess, automatically? It set them all to black. So it's going to gradiate those out. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of click here. Oops, I didn't want to do that. I accidentally set that point to the wrong thing. Now I need to select this point. Incidentally, holding down the Command key, remember, we'll bring up your last used arrow tool. And then I'll click here. And then there are actually points on the edge. Oops, I did the wrong button. What key? There are actually points along here that need to be set as well, so along the edge of your document. And I'll press the I key to bring up the eyedropper. And then I'll kind of sample a color. I don't want to sample this white. I want to sample right over here. Now be careful, because there are points. Oh, why does Illustrator do this? There are points along here. Let me move these handles out of the way. Let's see. There are points on here that are not associated with the gradient mesh, but are instead associated with the path that the gradient mesh is placed on. So don't try, if you don't see a line coming, actually I take it back, there is a line coming out of this one. If we can see this line, this kind of row coming out of here. But this one doesn't, at least I hope it doesn't. This one is more associated with the path and not the mesh itself. You don't act, these points won't have colors with them. Oh, I'm so sorry. I just hit the mic. That's going to be really loud. Sorry. So somewhere at 21 minutes. So be careful about that. I'm going to undo that because I made some changes to my Bezier handles. You can also, if you want to set multiple points, you can bring up your white arrow tool by holding down the Command key. You can kind of drag and make selections. And if you hold the Shift key, it's usually, to be perfectly honest, it's kind of hard to like find that teeny tiny little point. But usually you kind of have a pretty good idea. So holding down the Shift key and clicking and dragging with the white arrow tool will let you see how these points are darkened. That means I have them selected. But this point right here, I don't have it selected because it's still kind of white out. I can set the color of multiple points at the same time. Actually, you know what? I think I'd much rather sample a green from inside of here. Oh, that looks much better. So I could actually, marquee select the entire object and associate that with a green and just kind of get that over with. If you do feel like moving these points, make sure you hold down the Shift key because you want to, oh, you know what? Oh, I want to grab the gradient mesh tool and then now hold down the Shift key. Okay, so here's actually a really important thing going between these things. Notice that while I'm holding down the Shift key, but I have the gradient mesh tool selected, right? I'm using the gradient mesh tool. It will keep it to that column, which is actually fairly useful. Because one of the earlier mistakes that I've seen is people like really try to like contort their meshes to get them to do what they want to do. And usually you want it to envelop the object as though you can perceive sort of a three-dimensional shape. You can almost imagine this mesh kind of surrounding it in 3 dimensions. So with the gradient mesh tool selected, if I hold down the Shift key, you're going to have it a little bit more controllable, where it will either manipulate that point based on the row or the column, which will help you from really contorting your mesh out too much. But it doesn't do it with the arrow tool. Nope, the arrow tool, by holding down the Shift key, will constrain your movement of both of the row and column to 90-degree angles. See how it's still moving the row and column together? Oh, how much fun you're going to have working with the mesh tool. It's so confusing. If you find that a mesh isn't working for you, again, just delete it. So grab that mesh tool, hold down the Alt key, and then click the line. We'll delete that row. If you click the point, it will delete the row and column together. Usually you don't want to do that. And we have kind of a highlight here, so maybe I want this line to, let's see, can I click and drag a line? Nope. Kind of want this to sort of go over here. I'm sort of doing what I told you guys just not to do a second ago, but. And I might want to grab the eyedropper tool and sample that point, so I'm starting to get, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to kind of go through here and select a point. I'm holding down the command key with the eyedropper tool selected. And then I'm clicking the point itself and determining what color I would like it to be. And don't feel constrained to using the object beneath it or trying to create too much detail. Like, you don't need these little spots on here. We really just want to recreate the 3 dimensions of the object. And realistically, I would actually like to have more columns and rows, especially towards the edge of the document. That's where a lot of gradation tends to happen. And every single one of these, just kind of, put on some smooth music. Some Highway, wait. Who did Highway to the Danger Zone? I can't think of his name. Kenny Loggins, some Kenny Loggins. Before he did, before he turned his back on smooth music and created, that's a joke, son. It's a joke, son. All right. I can't do Foghorn Leghorn. So yeah, just holding down the command key, which will bring up my last used arrow tool. Happens to be the white arrow tool. So clicking that point, and then with the eyedropper tool selected, I am working with the eyedropper tool. Clicking that point, and then it's kind of setting these colors. And then I'm going to want to hit Command Y every once in a while and check out my object. And we notice that, let's see. We notice that my highlight is getting kind of scrunched in here, right? It's sort of looking like a straight line when I want sort of like a more spherical thing. Well, what's happening is that I have kind of like too many meshes here. What I would really like to do is move this entire line up, but I can't. You cannot move entire columns up. Like, I can try shift clicking these points and then dragging them up, but look what it does is it starts to really screw with it. The only thing you can do is delete that mesh. So I'll grab the gradient mesh tool, I press the U key on my keyboard. And then I'll delete that line, and then I'll create it a little bit higher this time. Oh, it did black. That's weird.
How did you delete the line with mesh tool?
Hold down the Alt key, and then click the line. If you click the point, it will delete the row and column. If you click the line, it will just delete that row. And then I need to resample this color, so I'll press Command Y to kind of hide, because the eyedropper tool will sample whatever it sees, right? And you can see here that I'm starting to, I need to do it with the line beneath here. Actually, let's go ahead and do that. I need to do it with the line beneath here and kind of get that point a little bit more spherical. Command Y. Eyedropper tool with the I key. I've got that point selected, and I'll eyedrop that. Let's hit Command Y to see how we're doing. And I might need, I keep adding, so I kind of need a row here. Let's see if I can create a column. I got a column. Okay, good. Be careful, because it's not always intuitive if you're going to create a row or column. Sometimes you can actually click along here, and that will help you that way. Let's see, I'm going to want kind of a line here, and maybe a line here. And there isn't some prescribed way of doing this. There's no set rules for kind of creating where to create these points. I suspect that everyone's illustrations are going to look a little bit different. And don't forget that you're not, you are not constrained to using the eyedropper. If you feel like you sort of know what you're doing, you can kind of select these points and oops, I want HSB color mode, and change your saturation and brightness to, like, maybe I want this to be a little bit brighter, maybe a little bit darker or something like that. Maybe increase that saturation. Yeah. So if you create a square, I'm going to go ahead and stop the video.